Hi, I'm Ben Warren. If you find yourself in the trunk of a Miata, you probably deserve to be there. Welcome to TrackSupport. I've always called autocross the entryway drug into racing because it is a very inexpensive way to experience amazing thrills in vehicles and smaller venues. So my first autocross experience was my wife and I had just recently been married, and we moved kind of back home, and I'd always wanted to get into racing. So there was a local car club that had a racing event that was about 45 minutes away from where I was at. So I had to get up extra early to get there on time to go out there. Smelt the ether, my eyes rolled back. I was sold, so excited, make sure I did all the right stuff. We went out there and I raced for the day, got my car tech, got in my run group, and I was hooked, man. They always joke, get your kids into racing and they'll never be able to afford a drug addiction, and I believe that. So you get to show up in the morning real early. You check in. Some places require you to register before the event, so they kind of have a list of names. So really depending on where you go race and who you race with, they kind of dictates if you can do it, weeks before, register online, or if you just show up and however many guys get out there, depends on how many run groups they do. As far as autocross goes, typically you might spend about $100 or less for an event. And what I mean by that is this. There are a lot of venues that might have a 1-day event or a 2-day event or a 3-day event, depending on what they're doing. But typically an autocross event is something you can arrive there in the morning, pay, register, get teched, get set up, ready to go, and hop in with the run groups, get done by the afternoon or the end of the day, and go home. So it's usually all packaged into a 1-day event. Typically it's on a Saturday or a Sunday. Some places might require, if you're brand new, to do some classroom time or like a classroom session, the day before the event, or first thing in the morning they'll have like a novice group meeting to kind of walk you through what it's going to take to, race in the event, so you kind of know what's going on and familiarize yourself with what you're doing. As far as autocross goes, though, money-wise, you might spend about $100 or less. And the reason I say it is different venues will have different costs to do the autocross if you're a yearly member or not. They might range anywhere from $30 an event to $50 or $60 an event, and there could be a $10 to $20 variance there if you're a yearly member or not versus a discount. And then whatever you spend, on your lunch and your gas to drive to the event and gas home, $100 is kind of like a good ballpark currently to enjoy yourself at an autocross for a day. I actually was in a real unique situation because my wife and I moved to a medium-sized town or city called Jackson, Tennessee. And at the time when we first moved there, I got tapped into an autocross group in Memphis, which was about 80 miles away. If you're going 70, 80 miles on the interstate, you get there in about 45 minutes. And it was on the outside of Memphis in a little town called Millington. But it was at a naval base on an airstrip, and it was a runway at an airport. I'd get up early in the morning, go out there, get up extra early so I can be there at their starting time, which was like at 7 a.m. So I had to leave my house at like 5:15, 5:30. So I got there, got set up, and was ready to rock. So basically I had to get up and go to their event because it was the closest one I could go to. The other alternative is about an hour and 45 minutes to 2 hours away was Nashville. And they had a lot of venues too, and a couple different places that did autocross. So what I found out was all my gearhead buddies in Jackson, Tennessee and I were like, man, we love doing this, but it just really sucks to have to get up early and extra travel time for us to just go to an event. So my young entrepreneur mind was like, well, what does it cost to buy all the stuff to do this? So I went out and I bought a bunch of stuff to start my own autocross business. I got in with the insurance company. I found a location or two that we could go race at the time. And I knocked on all the right doors. It took me about a year of my day off every week before I had kids to go run around and see what it would take to set up my own autocross business. And being new at it, I did it for nonprofit at the time. Now, I never really made back all my money I spent on it initially throughout the couple of years I was there. The Autocross is still going to this day as a nonprofit with a bunch of my former buddies running it. And it was a great thing because it let all my gearhead buddies locally be able to come and experience it at our hometown versus having to drive an extra 2-3 hours on the road every day to go pay more of a premium to go do it through SCCA or NASA. I had an independent. It also helped me out with sponsors too. You know, a lot of people are more apt to help you out if it's nonprofit for profit. Now, looking back on it, I should have bought a big fancy trailer, spent more money and done it for profit and taken my show on the road, but you learn. But it was lots of fun with friends and new people and meeting new guys that wanted to get into it and veteran guys that were happy to get out and race for the day. So there's 3 main formats of autocrossing. You can usually do it with SCCA, NASA, or an independent is what I'll call it. SCCA is kind of like the grandfather of motorsports. They're one company you can go to and go through the ranks, get experience, and get racing driver's license to race in certain series and race events and things of that nature. So SCCA has a lot of rules, regulations for pretty much any vehicle that goes out there on the track, whether it's an autocross, a tracking event, a racing series, an endurance race, that you have to go through and see what it's going to take to race at that level. That being said, SCCA has a very unique way to categorize a car. And what I mean by that is this. When you have a car, and let's just say a Mustang, it has different trim packages and models you can pick that have different things on it. For example, if you get an entry-level just Mustang, typically that's going to be a V6 or a 4-cylinder depending on what year it is. When you jump up to, for an example, like a GT model, it's going to have a V8. So the way SCCA basically looks at that, from my understanding, is when you put a Mustang on their chart of what level it can be in or race at, what class, so to speak, that Mustang is classified as, it's going to be at the lowest base model. And they're going to assess that vehicle with a point system or some kind of rating that we say a Mustang is, this is your base model Mustang. Now, as you add things to it, like if you go from the base model Mustang that's typically a 4-cylinder or 6-cylinder to a V8 Mustang, well, now that puts you in a different class and category. SCCA also has a lot of rules about what you can do as far as aerodynamic changes to the car. For example, when I first started autocross and I had my little import car that I was real excited to get out there on the track, one of the things I wanted to do right off the bat was to get this really cool pair of fancy side mirrors to the car. But the reason I never pulled that trigger at the time was if I had changed just the side mirrors on my car, that bumped my class all the way up to a top tier race car because the SCCA in their rules said that was an aerodynamic change to the car. So you have to make sure when you go racing, you're building a car for a class or what kind of racing you're wanting to do, you pick the right platform and you make the right changes so they don't bump you a crazy class where you're not competitive. Because be honest, if I change my side mirrors and they put me in the top class, but I still have a very base model car, I'm going to get eaten alive. But those are their rules and I'm playing in their sandbox. Now, that's SCCA. They got a great platform. They've been around for years and they kind of set the standard. Now let's fast forward to NASA. In my personal opinion, I think they're more the new kids on the block, kind of have a little different way of doing things, but in all reality, not so much in autocross, but when you get into tracking and endurance racing, a lot of their safety stuff is kind of about the same. There's little variance there because the name of the game is everybody wants to be safe. But when you look at NASA and autocross platforms, I personally really love their platform versus SCCA. The reason is this. They have a giant list of all the cars that are out there. And again, it's at the base model is where you start. So for example, say again, we'll use the Mustang. If you get a base model Mustang, you're here. Now what they do is genius. They give you a bracket of about 40 points, I believe it is, to build that car however you want. But for every 40 points you add on and stack on there, you bump a class up. So it allows somebody like me who might want to change my side mirrors or a different motor or different suspension, I can dictate exactly how I want to build that car to bump my class. So I feel it's a little bit more level playing field versus the SCCA, but again, it's everybody each to their own. As far as the independent goes, I love it. When I owned an autocross business for nonprofit, it was the setup I went with for a couple of different reasons. One, I was new starting out, so I didn't have to pay like any yearly dues to like NASA or SCCA or anything like that. Not that they would have been horrible, but I was able to kind of run my own show and do it how it worked for me in my area and the guys that are coming and paying money to race with us. What I love about the independent is they might have something that's real simple. They might pick something like, I know ours was very entry level, but we did it real simple. We basically said, okay, we had a class for front wheel drive vehicles, rear wheel drive vehicles, all wheel drive vehicles. And then we eventually did a truck series. And then we had a what we call unlimited series. And what that meant was basically anything that had like a tire tread wear rating of 200 or less was in that super unlimited class. So basically you can bring whatever you want, however you doll it up, whatever parts you put on it. And we had a front wheel, rear wheel, all wheel, or a super unlimited class. So with these independents, you have to check with them specifically. The rules are usually a lot more relaxed. They're usually a lot more fun to be at. And everybody's usually a bit more laid back, but they're all great venues, all great entryways to get into autocross. You just got to go out there and experience it yourself and have some fun. So if you've never been to an autocross, like everything else, go check it out, have some fun. The very first thing I would say do when you get to an autocross is they will have a driver's meeting and they will have a tech. And then the beauty of an autocross is you can use the same area, the same massive parking lot, same airstrip, runway, whatever open area you have to run these events in, they can change it because you're literally just setting out one obstacle to the next obstacle with road cones. So the joke about the chalk lines is this. I've always been told, and I always say they're more like guidelines versus, an actual area you have to stay in. Basically, you got to get yourself from obstacle A to obstacle B without messing up an obstacle or knocking over a cone. The whole thing about an autocross is don't hit a cone, and if you do, make sure it's still standing up in the square. There's lots of references to this, but basically you're going to have a little square out of tape, or somebody will put 4 dots on the ground once they've placed a cone that's vertically standing. And if a car comes by it and hits it, that cone can flip up in the air 20 feet, spin around, whatever. But as long as that cone lands standing back up in that original square, as long as part of it is touching in that square, you're good and there's no harm, no foul. But if you hit that cone and the cone knocks over, or the cone gets knocked out of that original square where it was set up, it's usually a 2-second penalty on your time. So the idea of an autocross is you want to plow through it as fast as you can, put it together the best you can without hitting a cones and without missing an obstacle. Typically, if you missed an obstacle, you automatically get a DNF. And so your time will be zeroed out. So you want to make sure you get through the obstacles the fastest you can from start to finish and not knock any cones down. The other golden rule of every autocross, do not hit the timing equipment. I was always told at the first group I ran autocross with, the SCCA, they had a kind of an awesome joke that was like, if you hit the timing equipment at the end of the run, just keep driving and go home. Because you pretty much ruined everybody's day. In a typical autocross, like after you get there, you check in, you register, and they have a driver's meeting. Something awesome that I highly recommend is they let you walk the course. That is valuable. Walk it, watch how other people watch it. Try to pick up on what they see and how they're going to approach a turn coming from obstacle A to obstacle B. After you have done the driver's meeting and walked the course and kind of feel familiar, what they're going to do is they're going to break everybody up into 2 groups, typically. Sometimes they'll do 3, that gets a little chaotic, but typically there's going to be 2 run groups. So what will happen is you'll have run group 1 will be the first guys that go to their car, they'll get on grid, and they'll get ready to race one at a time. While they're run group one, if say there's 100 people, they'll put 50 people in run group one and 50 people in run group two. Run group one will set up on the grid and get ready to race one at a time, while run group two is typically going to run the show. They're going to put different people out on the tracks in different spots, and they're going to have extra cones, walkie-talkies, fire extinguishers, thing of that nature. So if somebody's out there running and they knock over a cone, they can stop the next guy before he races, and they can go out there and set the track up right so the next racer is hitting the same obstacles just like everybody else. Then what happens is after those guys all complete 1 or 2 or 3 runs or however they do it, they'll stop everybody and they'll swap. So then run group 2 will be gridded up ready to race, while run group 1, who's already raced once, will be out on the track running the event for those guys to race the track. So it's kind of a work fun event. When you're not working the event, working the track, you're having the fun racing on the track. So the cost of an average autocross is typically about $100 or less a day. It's basically, the money it costs for you to register for the event. Some will let you register it online. Some of them you register at the event there on site. And then the travel costs to get there and back, and then lunch. So when you get your vehicle teched, basically that's usually after the driver's meeting and registration. You're going to get it teched around the time you get it registered. Some places require you get it registered before you tech, and some they're going to want to have it teched before you can register. But basically you're going to pull up to an area they have or a line that they have going. You're going to pop the hood. You're going to open the doors, open the trunk. And what a typical racer wants to do is when you get there, find your spot wherever your parking spot is, not your grid spot before racing, but wherever your camp is going to be for the day. And you unload everything. You get out floor mats. You get out anything loose. Anything that's in that vehicle that can come out, you take out, because they don't want things flying around in the vehicle, because you're taking the vehicle to its limits, throwing it left, throwing it right, gas, brake, you're all over the place. So they don't want anything loose in that vehicle to be flying around to hurt a person or fly under your gas pedal or brake pedal where you can't use it. There's all kinds of safety reasons. So basically get there, find a spot, unload everything out of the car. You say, well, hey, I got some crap in the trunk, but the trunk's going to be closed. Doesn't matter. You don't want that stuff flying around back in there. Also, too, it's all weight, right? Less weight, you go faster. Once your vehicle is emptied out of all the unnecessary things that you can take out of it before you race, you drive up to your tech line. You're going to want to pop the hood, open the doors, open the trunks. They're going to check things like making sure your battery is tight and tied down so you don't lose power while you're driving from like a loose connection, something like that. They're going to make sure your wheels are on there real tight and sturdy, that you don't have any loose lug nuts. I've seen it before. Wheels fly off on an autocross. They're going to make sure that there's no big holes in your firewall, so if there's a fire that it would, come through. They're basically just going through that vehicle to make sure there's not anything blatantly obvious to them that would cause an issue or be a potential issue once you get that vehicle on track and start driving it like you stole it. So I'm actually going to have a list posted or a link posted to our website where I'm going to have a list of typical items, the most common items you might want to bring to a local autocross for the first couple times. But as far as the autocross stuff goes, check out the list. It's going to show basic tools, something that, a tire gauge. It shows you tire pressure, water. Always bring lots of water. Basic little tools. And as you start going to an autocross, you'll learn more and more like what you need, what you don't need. And you can kind of tailor it up where you can get like a go bag or a couple handy tools. Some people get really crazy with it, but it all just depends on what you're wanting to do and what you need. Thanks for watching. Make sure you definitely check out the links below. We're going to give you a link to SCCA autocross page, NASA's autocross page, and we're going to have a link to our website where we're going to have a page of just a checklist of good things to have at your first autocross till you get your feet wet.